Welcome to Logic and Liquidity, your source for smart financial analysis.
Welcome to The Explainer. This week, we're looking at what feels like a major turning point for the global economy. It's a story that stretches from the snowy peaks of Davos all the way to a policy shock in Washington that is really shaking up the markets. And look, this isn't just any old week. What we're witnessing here is a powerful collision of global policy talks, a sudden regulatory jolt in the US, and some huge shifts in technology, all happening at the same time. It's really setting the stage for the rest of the year. Okay, so here's our game plan for today. We're going to start with the big picture, the global conversation happening in Davos. Then we'll zoom in on a pretty surprising rate cap proposal in the US. We'll see how companies are reacting through their earnings, take a look at China's long-term high-tech strategy, and then wrap things up with the Federal Reserve. All right, first stop, the Swiss Alps. We're at the 56th World Economic Forum, and this year the theme is a spirit of dialogue. That's really a call for everyone to work together in a world that, let's be honest, feels like it's pulling apart at the seams. Yeah, and the WEF president, Burj Brenda, he really doesn't mince words here. He's basically saying that with all the geopolitical and economic craziness going on, talking to each other isn't just a nice to have, it's about survival. And you can really feel that sense of urgency in the turnout. I mean, we're talking record numbers this year. Nearly 3,000 leaders from governments, businesses, you name it, all gathered in one place to try and figure out these huge shared problems. Now, one of the biggest topics buzzing around Davos, it's all about the next wave of AI. We're moving past the kind of AI that just generates text or images. They're calling it agentic AI. So think about it this way. It's not just about an AI that can write you a report. We're talking about AI that can research it, analyze the data, and then even schedule the follow-up meetings, all on its own. It's a massive shift, and 25 of the biggest tech companies have actually pledged to help 120 million workers get ready for this change by 2030. So you've got this spirit of cooperation in Davos, but then, back in the United States, a regulatory bombshell just dropped, and it's sending serious shockwaves to the entire financial industry. So what is it? It's a proposed one-year cap on all credit card interest rates, at just 10%. Now, to give you some context on how huge that is, the average rate people were paying just last year was over 21%. That's a massive drop. So on the one hand, the idea is to help out consumers who are carrying a record $1.17 trillion in credit card debt. But on the other hand, this policy takes a direct shot at a core moneymaker for the entire banking industry. And you better believe the market reacted. It was instant and it was brutal. I mean, just look at this. Lenders that really depend on that credit card interest, companies like Capital One and Synchrony, their stocks just tanked, down almost 10%. Even the big, diversified banks like JP Morgan couldn't completely escape the fallout. Of course, the industry fired back immediately. Banking groups are calling the proposal devastating. Their argument is, look, if we can't charge higher rates for riskier borrowers, we're just going to have to stop lending to them completely. Which, well, that could end up hurting the very people this policy is supposed to help. It's a classic dilemma. Okay, so this threat, this regulatory shock, is causing a huge shift in where money is going. And we can see that story unfolding right now in the latest batch of corporate earnings reports. You could say investors are switching from playing offense to playing defense. Money is just pouring out of sectors that are suddenly in the hot seat, like banking, and it's flowing into these more established, safer businesses that can weather the storm. Okay, let's look at a few big names here. Take Netflix. For them, it's not just about getting new subscribers anymore, it's about making real money from them with advertising. Then you've got Intel, which is in this epic battle for manufacturing dominance. And then there's a classic defensive stock like Procter & Gamble. That steady dividend, it starts to look really good when you're a nervous investor. So while markets in the West are reacting to these day-to-day shocks, the world's number 2 economy, China, is playing a completely different, much longer game. We're talking about a massive strategic pivot. So China's latest GDP numbers are out, and they landed at 4.5% growth for 2025. Now that number points to a recovery that's, well, let's just say it's challenging and a bit bumpy. In fact, it's the weakest quarterly growth we've seen in 3 years. But here's the crucial thing to understand. This is not an accident. This isn't just a random slowdown. It's a deliberate, calculated pivot. Beijing is actively shrinking its gigantic property sector. I mean, this thing used to be almost a third of their entire economy. And they're redirecting all that energy and capital into a new growth engine, high-tech and advanced manufacturing. And this isn't just talk. This whole shift is now locked into their official national strategy. The goal is to build a whole new economic base, one that's built on things like AI and quantum computing, while using tech to supercharge their traditional industries. All right, for our final piece of the puzzle, we have to look at the very bedrock of the financial system, the U.S. Federal Reserve. And right now, it's facing what you could call an unprecedented test of its authority and its independence. Okay, before we dive into the political fireworks, let's talk economics. All eyes are on inflation. The markets are just holding their breath for the next PCE data to drop. That's the Fed's favorite way to measure inflation. Everyone is looking for any hint that we're getting close to that magical 2% target, because that's the green light for the Fed to maybe start cutting interest rates. And, oh man, the market is desperate for those rate cuts. But most economists think the Fed is going to stay put, at least for now. And that sets up this classic tug of war, right? Wall Street wants the party to keep going with cheaper money, but the Fed's job is to be the chaperone and make sure inflation is really, truly gone for good. But what's making this whole situation so much more intense is the incredible political pressure. I mean, it's gone way beyond just talk. We're talking about a formal Department of Justice investigation and even criminal subpoenas aimed at the Fed chair. This is a direct challenge to the central bank's independence, something that's been a given for decades. And that leaves us with a huge, fundamental question that's going to define not just 2026, but maybe the next decade. Is the very idea of an independent central bank at risk? You know, the ability of these core economic institutions to do their job without political interference, well, it's being tested right now like never before. And that is the inflection point we're living through.